the seller began threatening him, sending him photos of his home address, which he obviously had because he'd sent the bag to it. Amir has 2 young kids and a wife. His wife works from home, so she was feeling really frightened. There was persistent messages coming in over a number of days, threatened to come around to his house with a gun. Vinted, he felt, were very difficult to get hold of, weren't particularly helpful when he did manage to get hold of them.
Ellie Flynn, welcome to PoliticsJOE.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's our absolute pleasure. We're here to talk about your exciting new documentary. Before we get into that, how would you describe yourself?
I am an investigative journalist. I make documentaries primarily for Channel 4 and the BBC.
Excellent. So your new documentary that's coming out on Channel 4 tomorrow is Vinted's Dirty Laundry. It's a part of the Dispatches series. I'm sure our super savvy audience knows what Vinted is, but how would you explain what Vinted is?
So Vinted is a second-hand app primarily used to sell clothes, but you can also get kids' toys on there, household items, and it's become really, really popular over the past couple of years.
Yeah, it's been massive just in the UK, like the growth you've seen with the kind of the presence of advertising. Yeah. I've always thought it was slightly odd that Depop allowed that market growth. I always thought it was like Skype and Zoom during the pandemic. So the second-hand clothes market is massive at the moment. I think it's projected to be like a tenth of the global clothing market this year. What is your sense of why that growth has happened?
I think it's a combination of things. I think that particularly among young people, there is a real sustainability drive. I think people are trying to be more conscious in what they're buying. And so I think that's a big part of it. And I think that Vinted has been a big part of that as well in making kind of secondhand shopping, vintage shopping cool and fun. But I think the other big driver is affordability. I think that particularly over the past couple of years, times have been really, really tight for people. The cost of living crisis has meant that everyone's looking to try and save money where they can. And so secondhand shopping has been a big part of that as well.
Do you use it yourself?
Yeah, I love it. I'm a huge fan. Buyer, seller.
Anything.
Anything.
Want to plug anything now?
Yeah. You can follow me on Vinted.
I'll watch the doc then.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I did it. I've been using it for a couple of years now. And it's great. I think I've tried to be more conscious of what I'm buying. I'm trying to buy less fast fashion. And I think that Vinted just makes you feel better when you do want to buy yourself something. I've also got a 2-year-old, so he's dressed almost exclusively in Vinted because he grows out everything so quickly, and particularly that when he goes to nursery, everything gets trashed. So I look for the biggest bargains I can find.
So what was it about Vinted that you wanted to investigate? What was the impetus for this documentary?
I think the fact that it just seemed to be really blowing up, and it doubled the amount of users that it has in the UK from 8 million to 16 million, over 16 million. And we wanted to look into that growth, why it's so popular, but also whether that comes with any concerns. Because as we've seen with other big tech platforms, sometimes when things blow up, get a lot of users, grow in popularity, there's a lag in regulation that can sometimes cause issues.
And what was it that you found when you started to investigate Vinted?
So we found a number of different things that were of concern. So we found more than 100 items available on Vinted that are on the government's recall list. So essentially that's products that have been recalled from sale because they are deemed to be unsafe or dangerous in some way. So a lot of the things we found were electrical items, so things like hairstylers, hair straighteners. We found sort of wax heaters that beauticians might use, and also quite a few different kids' items. So kids' toys like rattles, where something might come loose from the rattle, and things like self-feeding baby pillows, which should never be sold anyway because they're quite dangerous. And essentially, we found that these were all, you wouldn't be able to get them on your high street, you wouldn't be able to get them in any other online retailer, but they're all available on Vinted, and people just don't know.
People just don't know, and also, I suppose, from the customer perspective, you're not allowed to sell these things on Vinted, so you assume that these things are allowed to be there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think from both the buyer and the seller's point of view, to be honest, I think that as a buyer, you go on, you see something, it looks like a handy thing that you might need for your kid, or, it's an electrical item that you assume is safe because it's available. I think people use Vinted in the same way they do other online retailers. I think that there's not necessarily that connection that you're buying from another person just like you all the time. I think you see it as available and you're like, oh, okay, that must be safe because it's on this big platform that lots of people are using. It's on the seller to ensure that they're following Vinted's catalogue rules, and that includes, not listing any items that could be dangerous or unsafe. But the other thing is sellers don't necessarily know. I mean, have you ever checked the government's recall list to make sure that things that you bought a couple of years ago are still safe or haven't been recalled? I think that people just don't know that those things might not be safe. And so I think they're probably posting them in good faith. And that's why I think it's important that Vinted is able to monitor that and make sure that those products are taken down from their platform.
Also, you make the point in your documentary that there's other items that are on the banned list that are available, things like used makeup and skin cream, which is gross.
It's so gross.
It's so minging. I looked this morning. You could buy a used eyelash kit for £7, which is obviously you shouldn't be able to sell these things on that platform. But also, if you're buying them, is that not on you? Is that not on you? If you get that eye infection, if you get conjunctivitis from your used eyelash kit.
Yeah, I think there should be a baseline that just don't buy used makeup. I think there's a reason that you can't return used makeup to a store. It's not safe, and it is. I mean, I personally would not want to be buying any used makeup, especially when you don't know where it's come from, you don't know what kind of skin condition someone might have, anything that could be contagious, could be passed on. We spoke to a GP in the documentary who said that, if you're buying used lipstick, for example, if someone has the herpes virus, that can be passed on through that lipstick. You just don't know what someone might have that's been using it. So please don't buy used makeup. Please don't sell used makeup. And that's something that Vinted should never have allowed on their platform. They say quite clearly in their catalogue rules that you can't sell used makeup, used cosmetics on Vinted, but these items were able to be listed. And they're listed as used. It should, for me, it seems like an easy thing to flag. If you're putting in cosmetics and you're listing it as used, that just shouldn't be possible if it's not allowed.
What is the tension between... Why should Vinted be responsible for people not following common sense?
Because I think that they are they're a huge platform. They have been valued at £4 billion now. They have had massive growth. They're the biggest secondhand marketplace. And I think that comes with a responsibility to ensure that your users are safe and are able to buy products that are safe. And I think that, yes, of course, there is a responsibility on sellers to ensure that they're following the terms and conditions. But I think that, unfortunately, people don't always read the terms and conditions. So I think when a platform grows to the extent that Vinted has, it's also important that they're monitoring them and ensuring that those rules are being abided.
It wasn't just people buying used skin cream that you found in your documentary. Other users you spoke to had much worse experiences, I would say. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we found a couple of quite concerning experiences. There was a man that we spoke to called Amir, who was harassed and threatened by a seller on Vinted. So he had bought a bag. It was his first time using the app, actually. He'd bought a bag for his wife. Not long after he'd purchased it, he received a message from Vinted's customer support saying, we've suspended this user due to suspicious activity. We're refunding you. Case closed. The seller, despite being suspended, was able to still use the private messaging function. So was able to message Amir to say, why have you got a refund? Why has this been cancelled? You've scammed me. Amir explained that it wasn't anything to do with him, that Vinted had Vinted had cancelled the order because of suspicious activity and offered to send the bag back when it arrived because the seller had said that it had already been sent. So he was like, when it arrives, I can send it back to you if you give me your address. This is out of my hands. Vinted cancelled it. The seller became quite aggressive, started threatening him, said that he didn't want the bag back. He just needed to be paid, was saying you need to pay me privately. Amir didn't want to take it off platform because that's not necessarily a safe thing to do. And then the seller began threatening him, sending him photos of his home address, of Amir's home address, which he obviously had because he'd sent the bag to it. Amir has 2 young kids and a wife. His wife works from home, so she was feeling really frightened. And there was persistent messages coming in over a number of days of this seller harassing him quite severely, threatened to come around to his house with a gun. And Amir contacted Vinted's customer support, flagged what was happening. They originally he was just getting a kind of automated response. Eventually got through to an actual person. They said that they had, suspended the account and they'd done what they can, advised Amir to go to the police. The police weren't able to help him. Thankfully, the guy never turned up, and the situation did just fade away in the end. But it was really scary for him for over a period of about a week, and he was left feeling really, really frightened. And Vinted, he felt, were very difficult to get hold of and weren't particularly helpful when he did manage to get hold of them.
That seems to be... There's a thread in a lot of complaints about Vinted, is that the customer service team are hard to get a hold of. And in a situation like that, you'd think that would be an absolute priority if someone's safety was in jeopardy. So it's pretty staggering that they didn't seem to take that as seriously as Amir or anyone would have liked.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of the main concerns that we found people had with Vinted, that when you do have an issue, it can take a while to get hold of anyone. They have this automated system. And I think that can be really, really frustrating. But in cases like Amir's, it can also be quite dangerous. And I think for him not to have felt like he was getting any kind of, useful response from Vinted made him feel really, really frightened. And I think that was really, really troubling for him.
You also found that there was an issue of images being taken off of Vinted and used on a sexualized website, which is just horrific.
Yeah, this was it was so gross, to be honest. So we found this website. It was called Vinted Sluts, which is even the name itself is so gross. And it was just photos of women who had been selling things on Vinted. And these are just photos that I think any woman would take. It's either photos that they, were out when they were wearing an outfit and then they've posted that on their Vinted, or, they're just like in a mirror showing an item that they've got for sale. There was, in my view, nothing overtly sexual about these images. They are just images of women trying to sell clothes on a secondhand marketplace. And they were used on this website. They were, zoomed in places. There would be comments on the women's bodies. Each woman would have a profile, sometimes with hundreds of photos. It would say their location, so what country they were in. It would link to their Vinted profile. It would also sometimes link to their other social media profiles. And it felt to me like it was encouraging people who'd found this website to perhaps get in touch with these women. It felt like it was opening a door perhaps to sexual harassment on the app, which is something that some women have experienced. And it was just gross, to be honest, to see these, there was nothing sexy about trying to sell clothes you're not wearing anymore on Vinted. And
it's a transactional thing.
It just blows my mind. I feel like I've done a lot of work that looks into women's safety, women's rights, and so it takes a lot to kind of shock me when it comes to the extent to which women are harassed, particularly online. And this really did shock me. I just thought it was just not something that I ever would have thought would have come from posting on Vinted. And we found a number of women from the UK who'd been posted on there. We got in touch with one of them, let her know that her photos were on there, and she was really, really upset. She found it quite distressing. I think that these were photos that were also posted on her social media that she'd taken sometimes on days out or nights out in outfits. She just didn't ever expect that they would be used in this way when she posted them on Vinted. And I think seeing them was really shocking for her.
There's also the culture of, you look on YouTube and it's like how to sell clothes on Vinted, how to sell clothes on Depop, and the advice that you're given by kind of, Depop influencers is to wear the clothes, is to show how they look, to show this, like, someone wearing clothes looks way better than just like laid out on your bedroom floor. So if that's being encouraged by the culture around these apps, you wouldn't have any sense that there would be something really, really grim, sexualizing, misogynistic like
absolutely.
this that could happen.
Absolutely. And in Vinted's own advice, they don't explicitly say take photos of you wearing the clothes, but they do advise you to take lots of photos, to take your own photos, not to use photos from wherever you bought it from's advertising. And I think that, that can be interpreted as, oh, okay, well, I'll put this on and I'll take a photo in the mirror and I'll post it to Vinted. And as someone who uses Vinted a lot, I am way more likely to buy something if someone is wearing it in a photo, because you can see if they have a similar body shape to you. You can see how it fits. You can see if it looks long. You can ask them how tall they are. And I think that as a buyer, that really, really helps. So it feels like a natural thing to do as a seller, especially if you're selling quite a lot, if you want to have success on Vinted, and for that to then be used in a way that was so overtly sexualized it's disgusting, to be honest.
And I suppose it's a byproduct of that website wouldn't exist without Vinted as a business, I suppose. Like, it's not that it's an easy way. Those people might have had a private Instagram or something and had like a limited amount of people that they post social media to. They might not have any social media presence, but just this avenue of you can log on to apps like these and just find whoever you want. Just a limitless amount of women to sexualize.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it also encourages other people to do the same, to upload photos to this website, to send in profiles, and then they would be posted. So it was this sort of collaborative experience between whoever was running the website and the people that were using it that was encouraging this harassment of women on Vinted.
What was Vinted's response to the website?
So initially, Lydia, who was the woman that we spoke to in the film, contacted Vinted and flagged that her photos were being used in this way. I caught up with her 11 days later and she had not heard back from Vinted at all, which I think was really disappointing for her. She was expecting quite a quick response. She was expecting Vinted to act really quickly, and I think it was another example of Vinted's customer service not always being effective. But we alerted Vinted ourselves and they did take action very quickly, and they have had the website removed. In
that case, and in the case with Amir, those are cases of two or many rogue users using Vinted in a way that's not designed for. So what responsibility does Vinted have to police those users' behaviour? Because those contracts are a two-way thing. They provide a service, and in order to use that service, you sign up to a list of rules and regulations. So that behaviour is unethical, criminal in some respects. So what should Vinted be doing beyond what they're already doing?
So I think that Vinted, first of all, needs to make sure that their customer service is always effective, that people are always able to get hold of someone when they need to, and that they are able to act quickly when there are issues. I also think that Vinted should use the technologies that are available to them to ensure that users are safe. So whether that's in terms of the messages that are being sent or the items that are being uploaded, I think that they have a responsibility to be trying to monitor the platform and trying to keep on top of that, and then also acting quickly when someone does get in touch with them to say, I have this issue, and making sure that they're able to get hold of a real person at Vinted. Vinted say that it is a safe and secure platform and that they are working hard to try and ensure that all of its users are safe. But I think that especially as it's growing at such a huge rate, that needs to be done more quickly. That
was what I was going to ask about. Do you think it's the scale of the growth that they just haven't caught up to? There's people falling through the gaps because it's such a huge platform now, and there's so many users, some with nefarious aims.
I think so, and I think that we've seen this time and time again with big apps that blow up, get a huge number of users, and the regulation tends to lag. I think that in the UK, consumers don't always have the best protections, especially when it comes to online marketplaces. And I know that that's something that campaigners like Which are working really hard to try and improve. But it means that there can be a bit of a wild west when it comes to shopping online on platforms. And it's not just Vinted, I think any online marketplace. But I think that when you see something growing at the rate that Vinted has, it's essential that they take that regulation into their own hands and make sure that the people who are using it are safe.
What was Vinted's response to the documentary been?
They've said that they're taking the allegations seriously and that they act as swiftly as they can against anything that violates their terms and conditions. And that includes the definitive blocking of sellers who break those rules. They've said that they're aware that sellers might not always be aware that their product's been recalled, and that they're constantly working on developing their tools and technologies to improve their services.
We talked about Depop drama before the interview. Have you had any Depop drama of your own?
I did have a sort of classic Vinted issue the other day where I sold something for £3, sent it to the wrong person, so then had to pay more than £3 to get it posted to the right person. So I've ended up just losing 25p by sending this to someone.
Oh, that's just such a bollock.
So honestly, it's just like, what a waste of time.
And I'm assuming the person didn't threaten to shoot you for doing that.
They didn't.
Okay.
That's good news. It was all, they were very understanding. It was just a complete waste of everyone's time, to be honest. Apart from the person who's got a free bag.
Yeah. That is God. I'm furious on your behalf.
I know, my fault. I should have been paying attention, to be honest.
Ellie, thank you so much for joining us. Your documentary, Vinted's Dirty Laundry, airs tomorrow, the Friday, the 18th of October, at 7:30 on Channel 4, and will be available to stream as well. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.